Welcome to episode 127 of the Daniel Yoris podcast with today's guest, Dr. NavNirat Nibber. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Joined here today by Dr. Nibber from the AOR Health Team. Dr. Nibber, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, Daniel. I'm very excited to talk about this. I think it's really important, and I'm just happy to share with your audience.
Yes, we're here to discuss quite an important topic. Maybe one of the more technically involved things that I've covered on the podcast, and something that is very important and far-reaching. Before we kind of get into that, can we sort of set the table, and can you let people know who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a naturopathic doctor. My name is Dr. NavNirat Nibber. I work with Advanced Orthomolecular Research, a manufacturer and distributor of nutraceutical products. So we provide supplements both for the end consumer, for retail stores, and have a long history in Canada. We've been manufacturing for over 30 years. So we've seen a lot of peaks and valleys in terms of regulation, in terms of uptake and interest. And obviously over the last probably 15 to 20, there's been significant development and growing interest. And we really pride ourselves on being a Canadian-based, family-owned company that is producing innovative health solutions in really accessible ways. So we try to make sure that supplementation is readily accessible for consumers and very reliable, because we recognize that there's a huge potential to improve people's health through supplementation. So I'm a senior medical advisor. I've been working for the company, well, spoiler alert, since forever. As I mentioned, it's a family company, and it's really guided and informed how I practice and how I approach chronic disease management and prevention in my own practice. So we're at this interesting precipice where so many people are taking supplements, and there's a lot of importance on the industry to make sure that we're maintaining a quality and efficacy of what's available.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's obvious to anyone who's like even remotely interested in health that people are taking more supplements now than ever before. The awareness of their existence and what the different ones are, and to some extent brands, of course they're the regular drugstore, maybe no-name brands, and for some products maybe those are okay, and for other products maybe not. But there's you get what you pay for with almost everything, and especially with supplements as well. And so, trying to do something that is improving your health, it's like, is that really the place you want to be shaving pennies off? I'm not really sure. I would say no, but, to each their own. So it is important to have, good quality companies, companies who are doing the due diligence to make sure that their products are of the highest quality. It's always nice to have Canadian products as well. As a Canadian myself, I mean, I was having a discussion with someone this morning, like asking for recommendations on, it was like a protein supplement. I was like, oh, this is the one that I use, but like, you're American. And so the person I was speaking to was American. And I said, well, the shipping would just make this like unreasonably expensive for you. It's like, it's not the product that's expensive now, it's the shipping. And same, there's so many great, US companies that make great products as well. But then when you have to ship it to Canada, plus the duties, plus whatever, it becomes 2, 3, 4 times more expensive, including the currency exchange. And so having Canadian products as well is just a money saver, where that money is going just towards the product, not towards the shipping and the taxes and the duties and all the things that are associated with it that don't actually help you. It's just, spending money for the sake of spending money. Yeah. So anyways, all of that being said, we are at what seems like a crossroads here in the Canadian supplement industry. I have very intentionally tried to, in preparation for this conversation, tried to stay away from reading too much into what's actually going on, because I want my questioning and my reactions to be sort of raw and like the average Canadian consumer, which is what I am. So we're talking about Bill C-47 and the Save Our Supplements movement. Can you tell us, we're going to get into the details of it, but briefly, what is this? What does it mean? And why do we care about it?
Yeah, I think you mentioned something earlier, which is the quality piece. And the consumer demand and the consumer expectation for high quality supplements is more important now than it's ever been, because there were almost no barriers to access before. So a lot of products were coming to market that maybe shouldn't have been making it to market. But now there needs to be a clear standard. And in the past, Canada has been a leader in regulation and monitoring what supplements make it to market. So, it being Canadian made and manufactured does inherently speak to a certain type of quality. It means that there have been steps that have been taken to make sure that an end user is getting high quality supplements. We, as I mentioned, have been around for 30 plus years. So we were here before regulations were ever introduced. And then once regulations were introduced, we adopted them, and now they're being amended. So Bill C-47 is simply the ratification of budget expenses. And within that budget was motions to adopt cost recovery initiatives around the regulation of natural health products. And what that essentially means is previously the regulations had multiple components to getting a product regulated. And now they are introducing additional fees in each of those steps in order to get a product license. And it is meant specifically to be cost recovery, to increase some of that revenue coming back directly from the businesses to the government to ensure from their perspective that the regulation is not being, is not causing more of a deficit. The, concern with that and why the Save Our Supplements campaign is taking off. This was developed by the CHFA, so the Canadian Food and Health Association, recognized pretty early on that what was being proposed did not take into account the reality of the cost of supplement manufacture and how this will then impact end users. Because ultimately, what we feel this is going to do is limit the ability of the average consumer to be able to access these supplements that really can have a profound positive benefit to them, at the expense of, it's not necessarily doing what the government has said it needs to do, which is, improve safety. We already had some great mechanisms already in place. So really this is just being seen as a way to charge smaller companies, and that's going to certainly impact our ability to manufacture.
Right. So my, again, very basic understanding from the beginning of this was that it was introducing more regulation, but it sounds like, and I'll probably ask you for clarification multiple times throughout this, but it sounds like what it's actually doing is not introducing more or new regulation. It's instead just increasing the cost of the existing regulation. So effectively, the quality of the output would be the same. It will just be more expensive. Is that correct?
Not entirely. So it's actually both. So there is a higher cost for each part of the existing regulatory framework, but certainly new pieces will come into play. So something called simple labeling, or plain language labeling will be introduced, and that does carry a cost. So it's both of those things. And again, I really want to emphasize and reiterate that we as a company, and I think most manufacturers of supplements, are not inherently opposed to regulation. Regulation does mean that there is a degree of protection. It's just, again, those cost measures and what's being asked doesn't seem to be aligned with the reality of, it doesn't seem to have been appropriately consulted with the manufacturers. It just seems like they were put out there based off of models from the pharmaceutical industry, and there's nuance that is being missed that is going to increase our cost of manufacturing significantly.
Right.
And we can get into each of those.
Yeah, definitely. My understanding has always been that supplement companies have had to go out of their own way to have third-party testing and third-party regulatory oversight, let's say, as a kind of catch-all phrase, to ensure that their products are what they say they are. And maybe this is potentially more of like an American pharmaceutical industry, or not pharmaceutical industry, but supplement industry issue, but like you put stuff in a bottle and what's in the bottle might not actually be what you said is in the bottle type of thing. And I don't think that is as bad in Canada, but correct me if I'm wrong. But to go out of your way to have the higher end certifications that what you said is in the bottle in the correct doses that you said was in there, and that the products were made cleanly and always tested for that stuff. So having that seems like a good thing. Like I always buy supplements that are from higher quality companies and companies that have testing and are transparent and whatnot. So I would, in my head, it's like, well, this is a good thing for the companies that are doing well. It's going to make it more expensive for them, but it will weed out all of the crappy companies. And that is probably not necessarily a good thing, because everything is going to make it's just going to make everything so much more expensive for the short term until the competition has been kind of weeded out, and then the good companies will sort of still be there, but then the new price is just the new price, and that really affects Canadians. It's getting expensive to live here, as it is all over the world. But as we lean more into kind of natural health, it becomes a challenge. It really becomes a challenge. So I guess kind of what are some of those nuances that you mentioned that like are used in pharmaceutical industry but not necessarily related or relevant to natural supplements?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I just really quickly want to address the weeding out of companies that aren't doing their due diligence. I think is a function or part of the breakdown as to why we needed to reevaluate the monitoring of the existing regulation, because Canada actually is one of the more regulated industries for natural health products. And I would say, maybe 10, 15, even 20 years ago, it did feel very much like the Wild Wild West. We were kind of left to our own devices. And yes, you as a company, it was on your own dime, and also whatever your company values, you do that additional testing and transparency. What I think the regulations for something called the NHPDID, so this is a natural health product database that ensures that there is a monitoring and there's a barrier to entry of the market. So if you see any products now, they have something called an NPN number. This is a license number. Just the inception of that whole process made it even the playing field somewhat. So we did end up ensuring that we were having some standardization in the industry, and companies now do, as it currently stands, do have to do. There's quite a criteria in order to sell your supplements. So you do have to ensure your facility is of a certain grade and quality. And then, testing and identity, potency. Canadians can feel a bit more comfortable knowing that, okay, there's certain requirements that exist. And actually, Canada has led the way in a lot of those things. The issue always ended up being in the monitoring. And so the ability to inform and ensure that these regulations were being upheld, that part, I think, was being left a little bit to, it wasn't as developed. So you would get certain marketing claims being made that existed outside of what was licensed. And so companies that were very compliant wouldn't be able to say as much, and then companies that weren't, were making these outrageous claims, and that can make it quite difficult. So again, it was the enforcement and the monitoring that became difficult. So I think we all recognized an issue existed. But this, I think what's happening is we're kind of, throwing everything away and restarting instead of trying to fix and implement, what already existed. And by throwing everything away, we are starting again, and that incurs a lot of cost. So some of those nuances is when you're manufacturing, there is a cost to get something called CGMP status, so good manufacturing status of your facility there, and something called NSF status. If you are manufacturing, you want these certifications to speak to the fact that your facility is of a high quality, that you are doing these testing, that anytime you're handling any biological materials like probiotics, for example, that you have proper processes in place, that it's being stored appropriately, because who wants, your botanicals being stored in really humid environments where they're prone to getting rotten or going rancid or anything. So those already exist if you want to manufacture. And for a company, we have to pay quite a lot, one for the installation of all of these, but then also maintenance. You get audited every 2 to 3 years, depending on which one we're looking at. And so there is already monitoring. And one of the proposed bills is a site license fee. In this budget. So the site license fee adds another cost. And it's a little bit redundant in that, like, if you are a GMP facility, you already have to be doing certain things and it's already being monitored. So what they're saying is we will now charge for additional audits. So you're getting audited multiple times with somewhat similar criteria. I mean, maybe there's slight nuance and difference, but overall, the core things that speak to equality and safety they exist. So yeah, something like that I think is a point of frustration, because there doesn't seem to be a valid argument other than it is a cost recovery.
Right. So that CGMP labeling or NSF, those are not government entities. Those are private companies. Is that correct, or is that wrong?
Those are, this is a good question that the nuance of it is, I don't know exactly how, but they are regulated. You cannot just get those. They exist, and they are. Yeah, that's quite a good question. I don't know exactly.
Well, because my head is going with that is, like, if the government is creating their own version of CGMP certification, then they're going to put the CGMP company out of business, because then it's redundant. But if you don't have to, if it's not a government requirement to have that CGMP, then it would make sense, I guess, for them to kind of like control it. Like, just from their point of view, it would make sense. Like, okay, well, if you're gonna pay these guys, you might as well just pay us, and we're the government, so we make the rules. And so pay us instead of them, and then that CGMP becomes obsolete, and then it will be whatever the government thing is called, whatever ABC they call it. But if that's incorrect, then it is just completely redundant. If both of them, one goes into the left pocket, one goes into the right pocket of the government.
Oh, I see what you mean. So CGMP status is the certification, and then you can apply for it from a number of spaces. But ultimately, if you're manufacturing, when you get your business license, you do get a site license from Health Canada. So it is already baked in there. It's just additional fees that are being added to that. So what some of those additional fees look like is, if you're doing sterile environment, there's an extra fee. There's an extra fee for the labeling assessment. There's an extra. So it just seems like the breakdown of a lot of those fees, it is coming off as quite excessive. And if we're doing an assessment of how this is going to change our production costs, we do see a pretty significant increase just in our baseline operations.
Are you able to talk about how much, maybe in like a percentage, format, like what percentage would this increase cost? And then, there would be some additional percentage on top of that to pass it on to consumers. But how much more expensive are we talking here to manufacture?
Yeah, this is a very good question. And I think because we're still in consultation, we haven't had as much transparency about hard numbers. But another area that we know, will significantly go up is in our licenses. So there's a site license if you're a manufacturer. The second fee that's being proposed is something called a right to sell fee. So this would be if you're a health food store and you want to sell, if we're selling on our website B2C, there's another fee for monitoring. That didn't exist before, so that adds another cost. And then the third cost is for each license. Right now, you can apply for a vitamin D license and your claims, and there's no cost for that. So there will be a cost associated with that. And a class 3 license, so something for like a novel product, like an NMN plus wheat germ, that would now fall into class 3, and that's about $60,000 just for that one license.
For a single product.
Yeah, for the single product. So I think you can imagine that that's not going to drive a lot of companies to want to take on these class 3 type claims. From the time perspective, that's actually getting increased. It's going to take longer to get your license. And then it's also going to be very expensive. So unless you can make that back right away, which in a market where, sometimes there's interest in certain supplements and sometimes it wanes, so it waxes and wanes. I think you're not going to see a lot of innovation there. So going back to your original question of what percent increase, I cannot confidently say, because until the consultation period is closed, we wouldn't be able to have specific numbers. We're still doing those assessments just based off of like best case, worst case scenario. And I think when we have those ideas, we're speaking with our representatives within the government and trying to make sure they recognize how much that would be. So unfortunately, I can't give you a specific number, but
that's fair.
We know that as a medium-sized company, that's going to impact us. Now, there was some provisions for smaller companies. And they did suggest that there would be cost mitigation measures for companies that were, I believe, under 100 employees and making a specific range of revenue, I think under 5 million, between 30,000 and 5 million. And I guess my concern there is that encourages a lack of growth for companies. Yeah. So we're kind of saying like stay small, whereas we could be encouraging the development and growth of Canadian companies. This works against that counteracts that.
It also just allows, like the first thing that I think about when you say that is like, well, if you're a bigger company, just split your company up into smaller parts and this division sells these products and this division sells those products, and on paper they're all separate companies, but then the bad, and that would be a fine thing, assuming you can get away with that and pay the accountant fees and all that that comes with that, but that's fine. But the downside of that would be someone who is less well-intentioned can be a small company and sell a shit product if they're, excuse my language, but they can sell a poor product because they're bypassing some of the regulation that the bigger companies have to absorb. And so that doesn't really, I think it's either, the thing for me is like, if this regulation is important, assuming that all of the stuff that they are asking companies to do is important, then it's important for everyone. And if it's not important for everyone, then it's important for no one. And that's just how rules should work. I don't know that that's like crazy logic, but it doesn't seem to be the way that it's being implemented, which just is so strange to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can understand why they would support, we have 230 products or SKUs available. So we have quite a large production, and we own our manufacturing facility. We're not doing a third-party manufacturing. So perhaps for a company that's only making one product, and that's their only SKU, they would need some sort of rebate. But you're exactly right. Like we we need to recognize that what it takes to enforce and to create that high quality of product does need to be standardized across the board. So it's, it's one of those things where it's like, why create a rule that is already causing people to think about how to game the system in a way, right, whereas we could really address the core issue, which again, like I said, we were not blind to the issues of the regulation that existed before. There were frustrations in terms of a lack of research access to get those really high quality claims, because, we as a company believe in the benefit of products that we're putting out there. And to be able to speak to those benefits, we need to provide evidence to support that. And to provide that evidence to support that, there needs to be more funding in the research of nutraceuticals. That seems to always be the piece that gets forgotten about when they initially created this health product directorate. One of the key goals was to also increase the funding for research into these things, so that because nutraceuticals have often been put on the sidelines of research, because usually they were, easily accessible. Vitamin C couldn't be put into a form that, pharmaceutical companies that could then use to make billions of dollars off of. So why study it? Whereas now they're realizing, no, there's a lot of benefit to studying this. So sorry, I'm going a little bit on a tangent,
no,
but
that's perfect.
When we're doing these changes, we also have to make sure that the infrastructure is available for us to make better safety and efficacy claims. And that comes from academia. And that's why, again, AOR has supported research since our inception. Since we started this company, we've had to support academia to motivate some of that development. But yeah, it does seem like we need to start asking regulatory bodies for appropriate oversight and equal monitoring. It seems like it comes back to the monitoring of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is completely a me statement, but it's like anytime the government gets involved, it's like, hey, I'm going to make this more efficient for everyone. Like, chances are that's not going to be the case. It might be well-intentioned, but the actual thing being done doesn't usually work out the way that it is made to be worked out. And I think that that's across the board. That's not just with health and with supplements. I think that's me and my personal opinion. And I think that many Canadians share that, whether you say it out loud or not. Mm-hmm. On the cost side of things, I think just one thing to kind of reiterate here, and I know that we can't say a number and that number is unimportant necessarily, but if we just think a little bit about, how many different fees that you mentioned and the trickle down of those fees, it's not just you guys who are the manufacturers, but it's also the facilities, it's also the retailers, it's also the practitioners. Like, that is 3 to 4, maybe even 5 layers of additional costs that are being put on your supplements. Like, I don't know what the number might be, the raw number, but like, it's not going to be $1 more expensive. Like, that's not what we're talking about here. It's going to be more than that. I don't know what it is. It might be double. It might be less than that, but it's going to be a lot. So like, this is something that's important. Another thing that is often criticized with a lot of supplement companies is the funding of their own research. If I create, Daniel's supplement, and then I fund a research study to say that, oh, my supplement is the greatest supplement that ever existed, well, like, you can't really trust that because I just paid for those results, essentially. And so, a company like yours, you guys are, I'm sure you're very careful about where you spend your money and where you support, because you want to support it and help fund that, because we do need private money to fund those things. But at the same time, you can't just front all the money for it, because then it has a conflict of interest. So you do need, government involvement and from other institutions who are saying like, hey, like, let's look at the actual effectiveness of vitamin D. What is the appropriate dosages of vitamin D? What are the indications for treatment, therapeutic use of vitamin D or regular use? What should the daily recommendations be? All of these things. and you're selling vitamin D on the other end, it's like it's very hard for you to just like run those studies and say, oh, look, we just made this new supplement that is exactly this thing and these recommendations. Like that's a little fishy, and that's why you can't do that. But if this money if all these fees was directed back into research and stuff, then you might say, okay, well, this is recoverable for us. It will pay us back in the long run. But like again, chances are, it doesn't sound like it's heading in that direction, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And when I mentioned the fact that we participated in a lot of research studies, there's ways you can participate as a manufacturer in research studies just by supplying, like actually producing the material that they need to use for a study. Oftentimes these are not then becoming marketable products. They're not products that we can sell right away because, again, the research takes time to catch up to industry needs. So a lot of it is we have the ability to support research in multiple ways that do allow for some reduced bias. But you're absolutely right. Ultimately, if you are funding a specific research study, that inherently causes bias. So you also want to be supporting research in indirect pathways. And I think that actually speaks to an important note of cost recovery. So a lot of these fee structures that are being proposed were being proposed based off of a percentage model or a baseline of what pharmaceutical companies currently are paying for their licenses, but they have DIN numbers, so drug identification numbers. And so it was like, okay, let's make self-care products somewhat similar based off of that or a percentage of that. And I think the inherent issue with that logic is that we're creating this false equivalency between the therapeutic index of a pharmaceutical and then also the cost recovery. Once a drug is made and produced, we know exactly how it's being distributed en masse. And for that company that's making the drug, there is an immediate cost recovery, a guaranteed cost recovery, right?
Right.
So in terms of, from a business perspective of making that investment for those initial licenses, you have fairly good recovery. Whereas there was a law that was passed, it was called Vanessa's Law, that inherently states self-care products and natural health products are different inherently, right? And we know that, yes, both are influencing health. And this is not to say that natural products are completely safe in every situation. They need to be used appropriately. And I've always advocated for, conscious supplementation, which means, knowing if it's appropriate for you. But the therapeutic window is by and large generally larger, and when it's not, we're able to speak to that. But the fact that you can take vitamin C at larger doses, and of course anything has a toxicity. Like if you take too much of anything, there will be toxicity. Yeah. But the inherent difference that exists between the types of products and the types of health solutions we're talking about means that companies making supplements will have to take a bit more of a risk when they're marketing a supplement, because you don't know if the market's ready for it. There is that bit of consumer demand aspect to it. Whereas with a drug, like it's going into pharmaceutical channels, it's going into the pharmacies, and so that cost recovery is a bit easier. So having a model for the fees that is this high, based again, like that class 3 license being $60,000, isn't going to incentivize many companies to make novel or unique innovative health solutions. We're going to stick to our vitamin D's and our vitamin C's and our magnesiums, and you're not going to see a lot of botanical diversity, or I kind of mentioned that we had NMN plus wheat germ. These are ingredients that hadn't been combined, but we know therapeutic, there's a potential there. And we're not saying, take this blindly. It's take it appropriately. We know that there is inherent, like there's still a lot to be discovered. There's a lot of research to be done. But yeah, I think we're going to block some of that innovation. And if you think about, people 30 years ago didn't know vitamin D should be a staple for Canadians.
Right.
So what is innovative now in 20, 30 years could become the standard, and blocking that innovation from companies can be quite detrimental, especially when we see emerging markets like South Korea is, really interested in new development of nutraceuticals. Europe also with very, very high standards and regulations, but they're even encouraging a lot of research and development. So I guess my concern is Canada going to be left behind from an innovation perspective? And then also we're kind of driving out a lot of Canadian business. So we're going to have to start looking at what other markets are able to support. And
yeah, I mean, the economics of anything is always unbelievably important, and that sounds like a very obvious statement to make, but sometimes it's not. Like, we're talking about healthcare, and you think that, oh, it's just like people are just trying to help people, and they are, but like, you can't have a company that's making a product that's selling and shipping across the country and doing all this stuff and not make money. Like, it has to make money in order for it to work. And so I think the difference between like a pharmaceutical drug is we can forecast pretty accurately, like X number of Canadians get this, X illness per year. And so if this new drug, Daniel's ABC drug, becomes the standard of care for that illness, well, then we know that we will sell/use that number of drugs per year. So we can spend as much money as we need to in like the research and development of the drug, because we know that automatically on day one of acceptance, now getting from day zero to in doctors' offices, maybe a 10-year process. But when that process is done, you know that you have like this guaranteed money that's coming in, because now it's the standard of care, versus like no one is being told by their doctor or whatever to take vitamin C, but maybe that's a strong maybe. But to take these things in certain doses, like there's no guarantee of selling these things, and especially stuff that is not new, like not the vitamin C's and D's and B's and E's and these things, like all the other stuff that is like really helping people. And like you said, there's not no downside, but the downside is very, very low for most people. And of course, you should always be educated and do your research and talk to people who actually know what they're talking about. Don't just walk into the store and buy one of everything and say, oh, well, let me just see what happens. Like, that's probably not a good idea. But even if you did that, it might not even be like that bad. You know what I mean? So versus if you just took one of all the drugs, like a pharmaceutical drugs, like you'd probably mess yourself up pretty bad if you're just experimenting. So,
right? And it is like, we want to operate in the space where we are doing what's best for the end consumer. And if that is restricting, again, I would never say that restrictions are always bad, but it's that cost component to it. We're already seeing supply chains start to change, both, with everything that's been happening in the last 5 years, but also climate change directly impacts what botanicals you can grow. And a lot of plant medicine is changing. Plants are growing, very differently. And when we standardize and extract, it's important for us to be sourcing out sustainable sources, so that we're not just taking and harvesting all these plants and then being like, oh, I guess that's all the saffron we have. Right. So if you want to do that in an ethical and responsible way, but still recognize that there are thousands of years of documented benefits with something like saffron, that maybe for whatever socio-political reasons wasn't investigated earlier, wasn't incentivized to investigate earlier. And now we have an opportunity to use these plants and for people to have real benefit. Why don't we want to explore that? And a lot of the methods, I think, that are being proposed are short-sighted and will prevent that expansion and growth.
Right. I think especially over the last couple of years, where a lot of people just, it's one thing for us to talk about it because we're, we're obviously biased. We're in the healthcare field and we're working with people. And so we see these things all the time. Probably more people that we interact with are knowledgeable or even aware of natural health products than the average of the rest of Canada. But it seems to me like, people are asking about things more like, oh, I heard about this supplement. I heard about that. I heard about this. What do you think about these things? And just in general conversation. Because people have been let down in other ways. They've been searching for solutions to their individual health issues for many years, and they haven't found it. And they're like, well, I saw, so-and-so on TikTok said this. And I'm like, well, that's not really a trustworthy source. But I mean, some people are like, hey, I saw this on TikTok and then I tried it and it worked. I'm like, okay, well, you rolled the dice there, but it worked. And so like, there's something to look at there rather than all the other stuff you were doing for the past 5-6 years wasn't working. And now this natural thing that is quote unquote alternative medicine that's been used for hundreds or thousands of years is all of a sudden helping you. Like, wow, what a concept. So it's really important to continue to support this. And I think like I don't see how this isn't a good thing for everyone except for maybe the pockets of people in the pharmaceutical industry. One thing I kind of wanted to circle back to before we just go down a rabbit hole of me bashing the government and drug companies is you mentioned that there were or acknowledge that there are pre-existing issues with the regulations from before. Now the new proposed regulations are probably not the ideal. What would you suggest are the actual ideal way to progress the regulations so that they're both protecting Canadians and the end consumer, but also fair to businesses?
Yes, thank you for asking that because again, I'm not one to, jump on a bandwagon of being really upset, but I think we see that there is a better way to do this. So the existing regulations have 3 barriers to entry to ensure quality. We have the barrier of the product with the NPN number. We have some jurisdiction and review of sites, again, with those certifications. And then there is a monitoring process that does exist, but is not particularly robust. So from the existing framework, I think certainly it would be beneficial to add more resources to the monitoring, as I mentioned. So what that I think ideally could look like is ensuring that no one, that in terms of advertising claims, there can absolutely be penalties when it steps outside of the license claim. And again, there have been times, I think, when any company, if you look at any company, sometimes speaks to a claim that extends beyond that actual benefit. And to avoid that, having more support and funding to the research so that the claims that we make are more accurate and representative. So yeah, 2 things is better funding for the research into these nutraceuticals, which is part of the directorate originally. And then the second part would be additional monitoring. And then certainly if fees need to be introduced because, there has to be a job, there has to be someone who is doing that monitoring, not necessarily basing that off of pharmaceutical fee schedules, rather, trying to do like a more cost efficient strategy for how we're monitoring. And particularly, with AI and with there's software and opportunities that can more efficiently scour what companies are saying about these, so we're able to monitor and identify who is outside of scope and who is within. So that I think could really help address just the baseline issues that existed. And then they did provide, so clean labeling techniques is all good, or the simple language labeling. I think there's a very strong argument to, if people aren't understanding the labels that they're reading, sure, that does need some review. So again, not really opposed to that, but being cognizant of packaging restrictions and our ability now to use, things like QR codes are more commonplace. So allowing for people to, I guess the concern with simple labeling is we're going to end up with these labels for products that are like 3 rolls long. So you're going to have to, peel back label and peel back label and peel back label. And it's just, it can get very cumbersome. And I don't know if that's, like the most realistic. So whatever solution that I think we could utilize technology in a more efficient way. And I don't think I have the exact right answer for clean labeling, but certainly I think better than just put more information on label.
Right. More information is not always better for people. If people don't know what they're reading in scientific language, putting more words in plain language doesn't necessarily help. Like, who's going to sit there and read all the things? Like, no one's going to do that realistically. Yeah. So it's like calories on the menu at a fast food restaurant. Like, no one's checking that, but like legally they have to be able to supply it. So having a QR code on the label would be great, and it takes you to a web page with all of the stuff if you want to read it. But like I would guess like 99% of people will never read that stuff. And to each their own, and do your own thing. I think the claims thing is a really important one though. But again, it has to be carried out, and like if there's a penalty, then the penalty has to be enforced. Like if they're going to say like, hey, it's a $100,000 fine for an outrageous claim, and then you make an outrageous claim and you don't get fined, well, then now there's no penalty for that, and you can make whatever claims that you want, because that's the way that the rule is being enforced, right? Rules are only as strong as they are when they're enforced. If not, then they don't exist. Yes. And I think that hurts everyone, right? If Daniel's supplement company says, hey, my vitamin C cures cancer, it's like, well, that's ridiculous. But by me doing that, and by that product selling well or getting attention, it downgrades the entire industry, because now it's like, oh, those natural health, woo-woo people are making crazy claims again. And it's like, well, that's not right. And I should be penalized. If that was my company, I should be penalized heavily for that. Now that's maybe more an extreme case, but like we can, you can downgrade that to whatever something that is really happening, and maybe that is even happening. I don't know.
No, yeah, it kind of is. And well, so I would say on that, like it's these outrageous claims. So monitoring for if people are doing that, and then yes, there should be penalty, but being very clear and specific in the language of what is an outrageous claim, because right. Sometimes in the past we've talked about just this is the research being done in vitamin C. There's been some research being done in cancer cells, and it speaks more to the importance. But you see those 2 words, and then it's almost like an accidental claim was made, because again, the language around what is appropriate and what is not is still also being developed. So I would say, as an industry, there's still a lot of growth that we can do. There's still a lot of opportunity there. And because science is so dynamic and things are changing, vitamin C for cancer before would have been, no one would have talked about that. But now, yes, there is emerging evidence. And I think when people are making the decisions, their purchasing decisions, they can know that is happening, but still understand what is appropriate for them from the bottle that they're taking. Like, what can this do? So yeah, and I don't know if there's a clear answer for that, but when we're talking about enforcement of marketing materials, much clearer language and that lack of ambiguity, because again, I hope to think that all the colleagues in our industry, no one is actively trying to manipulate, but how we speak to certain things can sometimes come off as sensationalist. And so that does, that I think that's reasonable to ask from a public health perspective that be addressed, but still leave room for the fact that a lot of these we don't fully know. We don't know the potential benefits, and we don't always know the adverse effects, and that is why it's inherently different from a drug, right? It's like, right. It's inherently different because we're still learning about it. And so when we offer these as supplements to individuals, it is with that caveat in mind of take this, you can take this, and it may help you, but it may not every supplement fits every individual.
Right. And I think that's where the specificity of language, which is something that I'm big on in writing and in podcasting. I do my best, and just in every day, it's like the specificity of the language matters. If to say that X cures, whatever disease is maybe incorrect, but to say that it supports the healing of so-and-so disease is not incorrect. Now, to what degree it supports it is highly ambiguous, and this is where you need to speak to someone who knows what they're talking about and how much you should take, the difference between a therapeutic dose versus a maintenance dose, and all of these type of things. One thing that I've heard, and from everything you've told me, it doesn't sound like this is true, but I heard a rumor that this was also part of this bill was moving towards needing or requiring prescriptions for some of these products. Is there any truth to that at all? Because that seems like it would be like I got to go to my doctor to get a prescription for vitamin D. I had to beg the guy for 3 years to give me a blood test for vitamin D. I don't want to have to go there every day to get regular supplements. Is that true at all?
So not directly. I think what the concern is that this opens the door for that. And the reason it does so is because they're stratifying the benefits. Like I mentioned, there's class 1, 2, 3, and they're going to start stratifying each type of supplement depending on its potential benefit or risk, which again isn't the worst thing to happen, because from a public health perspective, you are actually like a vitamin D works really different than, let's say, a licorice root extract, which, if taken inappropriately, a licorice root extract can change people's blood pressure and things like that. So, I'm kind of answering that question. They're stratifying it, and maybe a higher risk category could eventually require oversight by a physician or a healthcare practitioner. That I think maybe is premature, and but yeah, certain things like hopefully your basic vitamin B vitamins, your vitamin D won't fall into that. But as we know, there is such thing as vitamin D toxicity. It's still about. There has to be public education. There has to be education of healthcare practitioners who to be able to make those recommendations. But that I would say, it's something we should be cognizant of and monitor that there is potential risk for. But it's not specifically stated.
Right. Okay. That is very good to hear, because it's one of those things where it's like, I'm sure it would be fine if that were the case, if all of this was carried out flawlessly. And I don't have faith that it would be carried out flawlessly or perfectly efficiently. And even with like the dosage of some things, like one of the things that is readily available and like legal in the United States is vitamin D supplements at a dosage of 10,000 IUs per capsule. And that's illegal in Canada. You can't get that. I think only by prescription, possibly, but you can't just walk into a drugstore and buy that. And so to say that 400 IUs is the only dosage that you can take of vitamin D, and if you take more than that, then vitamin D toxicity becomes a thing. And the fact that vitamin D toxicity is even a phrase that maybe people are familiar with, but no one's ever talked about Advil toxicity or such and such other pharmaceutical drug toxicity. Like we hear about overdoses, but we don't hear about toxicity. Like the chances of you overdosing on vitamin D are not zero, but they're very low. And so the fact that this kind of like fear mongering has happened around these things is very strange to me, when it's perfectly legal in our neighbors right next door, and it's like you can walk in there and take it and like you're fine. And there are plenty of anecdotal stories, I would say myself included in that, we're taking very high levels of vitamin D, and can be great. It can be bad, but it depends on the individual, right? And so understanding this, it takes a little bit more knowledge and insight and education and effort on the level of the consumer or the patient. But to just downright say like this is bad, or this should be something you should be scared of, is not good. So I think, again, coming back full circle, is that having some more oversight into these things would be good, except I just don't trust that the actual execution of this plan would be ideal or beneficial for most people.
Yeah. And I think, ultimately the access points for the average Canadian, let's say, you do find out you have a vitamin D deficiency. Okay, you should be able to then readily access the solution for that. And
Right.
and it is as simple as, a vitamin D supplement, and then be very aware of what a toxicity could look like so you can start avoiding it. But there's regulation it walks that very fine line between assuming that your consumer knows nothing and really regulating for the most vulnerable populations, which I'm not against, but consumers do have access to information, and consumers do have the opportunity to not purchase. And I think if there's more language and more support around helping consumers make appropriate decisions, which does require us to be able to speak about things. I think even now I'm hesitant about what words I'm using because again, regulation matters, because your language matters, and you don't want to overstep claims, but you also still need to be able to speak to a potential benefit, which sounds like a non-answer answer, but it's like everything needs to be balanced a little. And with what's being proposed, I think we're shifting the balance so that it's somewhat strangling our ability to make these accessible, make these supplements accessible, and to develop the industry as a whole further. And what that leads it kind of makes space for companies, the smaller or medium-sized companies, being bought out as like pharmaceutical divisions, or and again, I don't want to jump to that. We don't know where it's going to go, but I think we need that transparency about how it can be. So people participating in the consultation process right now, I think is very important. Like the public participating in that, and also talking to your members of parliament to see, if it's actually going to end up benefiting you. Like your representatives should be able to articulate that to,
Right. I mean, another gap that this whole thing seems to create is that there wouldn't be a way to regulate supplement company, like for Canadian government to regulate supplement companies from other countries. So I can still buy U.S. products online, and those can still come in. And then the other thing, unless those would be subject to like Canadian regulations, is that true?
Well, yeah. So to be able to sell in the market, you have to comply with the regulations of that market. But as you mentioned, there are now ways with ordering that, like, it's becoming more and more easy to sell cross border without those regulations. So are we now making our population a bit more vulnerable to other?
Right, and even beyond that is that there's no regulation of, I mean, not no regulation, we're moving in this direction, but there's very little regulation of what people say on the internet. So it's one thing for you who has an actual degree with an actual college and actual rules to be upheld and standards to be upheld by. It's another thing for XYZ influencer on the internet to go and make crazy claims about whatever they want, and no one can say anything because, like, what are you going to do, take their license away? Like, they don't have a license to be taken away. They just have an Instagram account. Mm-hmm. And so there's no regulation of that. So by over-regulating the people who are in theory more educated and all this stuff, and letting the people who are louder just kind of get even louder than they already are, that opens the door to even more misinformation and improper guidance of people. Because when you're speaking to 1 million people on your TikTok account, there's no individual nuance or individual advice on that. And so then if you say, oh, well, so-and-so on TikTok, said this, and that, and then you go to your naturopath and say, oh, I saw this, they're like, well, that's not right. And now you're at this crossroads, because now they can go buy that product somewhere else and disregard what you, the naturopath, the educated person, said on this, but they're still going to buy it and get it. And so this is where, over-regulation of the people who are actually educated can lead to some other issues, because the reality of the world is that other people have voices too, not just those who are quote-unquote qualified, right?
Yeah. Thank you. I feel like you You put that so well. We can't always say that, but you feel sometimes when your hands are.
I can say it though, because I don't have a college or regulations to no one can take anything away from me. So I can say it.
Yeah. You sometimes just want to be like, no, this is, everything, a balanced approach to everything. And not jumping to like, everything will cure this. One person said this will cure me, and so it will absolutely work. And of course, I wish that we would be able to provide our, as a naturopath, that these services can be accessible to everyone. And I don't want someone to, not take the right supplement that could really help them because they can't get in to see an appointment. So yeah, there needs to be more of that education, more of that public health education about supplementation, which we're seeing definitely has increased since COVID. Absolutely. Like I've seen more and more people talking just vitamin D on its own, like people actually recognize the importance. So, certainly a lot to improve on, but I hope that we're not just throwing the existing regulations, which weren't necessarily bad. They addressed the things they needed to address. That we're not just putting additional red tape that is now going to actually hinder business and hinder access and ultimately burn out our industry, because Canada was, growing in this area. And I think we'll see in terms of trends throughout the world. You mentioned like the FDA it's a strange beast how it is in the States with supplements, because there's both, you're allowed to say everything and you're allowed to say nothing. So, when we had our operations, when we have our operations in, the States, I think a lot of, consumers there appreciate that it's a Canadian company, because they know that there was at least a barrier. There were things we had to do to ensure the safety and quality here so that they can take it there. But yeah, there are some, they have higher monitoring, I guess, but they don't have any barrier to enter the market. So yeah, you can kind of market whatever you want, but then if you get caught, you don't really they don't have a review process. So, very different market, very different, access point, but regulation isn't bad. Over-regulation, as you mentioned, it can stifle the wrong people, the ones who are actually trying to do well by it, and who do follow a code, an existing code of ethics and practices. So.
Yeah, the good people are self-regulating themselves, and if everyone was a good person, we wouldn't need regulation. We wouldn't need, if we extrapolate this like bigger, if everyone was like a perfectly good, well-meaning human being, we wouldn't even need laws, because everyone would just act in like the collective best interest. And like that, obviously doesn't happen, because people will exploit laws and people will do whatever they want with in the absence of them. So, regulation is for the bad players, and it impacts the good players negatively to an extent. But it can also be positive in that it weeds out the bad players as well. But this is why I really wanted to have this conversation with you, just to kind of get this information out there, make more people aware of it, myself included. Just so that we know kind of what's coming down the pipeline and what we can do about it. It doesn't sound like there's a ton that we can really do, like, talk to your local MP, but other than that, what can the rest of us who are not involved in this business, what can we do to help out with this?
Yeah, no, you can absolutely participate. There is a public consultation that is happening until August 10th. It was originally July 26th. That has now been moved to August 10th. And if you head over to the AOR website, does have a landing page with links to all of these. But ultimately, you just provide your feedback, and it will be taken into consideration. And anytime you are in a consultation phase, it's an important time for the public it's like our opportunity to make our voices heard. We as a company are already participating in that. Like I said, I think the CHFA is doing a great job with the Save Our Supplements campaign. They've started making sure that they're speaking to, the right policymakers. So supporting that is, again, done through the letter writing campaign. There's a lot of resources there. And then talking to your healthcare practitioners, because I think it needs to be a multi-individual approach. It needs to be coming from not just industry, because as you said, like we have the most impact will happen to us, but right. Healthcare practitioners, it can change how they practice and what they recommend in certain therapeutic decisions they're making. And then, I think just being aware that this may start changing your ability to access supplements. If we can make our voices heard early enough in the consultation period, we see these things change all the time. So,
right. Yeah. Good to know. I'll include the links to that in the show notes. I'll grab the links from you after we're finished recording, and put them in the show notes so that anyone who's interested in supporting and helping out, make your voice heard on this topic, you can click right there, message your local MPs, and just do your part to make this the best for yourself and for most the rest of Canadians. I think overall, it's not just the companies. It's again that trickle down effect. It's going to be a lot for a lot of us. So thank you very much for that. Was there anything else that you wanted to discuss in regards to this? Is there anything that we missed that you felt was an important piece to let people know about?
No, I just want to reiterate, I think we feel strongly that there's an opportunity to revitalize and improve what we currently have. And as a Canadian company, we want the Canadian natural product industry to be seen and regarded as one of the best as it currently is. And we don't necessarily want that to fall by the wayside. And, participating in research and having, supporting that research funding in multiple ways, however we can, is going to help us understand how to use these supplements better, and give access to the people who deserve it. So we don't want supplements to be inaccessible. We don't want them to be so cost prohibitive that people cannot use them in their daily life. And we want Canadian business to thrive. So we're quite strong. We feel very strongly about this, and we'll continue to advocate for those core values. Whatever way this regulation goes, we'll continue to kind of uphold that, those core values. Whether it means making some changes remains to be seen, but I think we're still very committed to making sure that at the end of the day, supplements are safe and effective for Canadians.
Right. No, thank you guys for leading the charge on this and for taking the time to talk today. And I know that we didn't really, we're running out of time and I don't want to take too much of your time, but switching gears just quickly, if there are any, just AOR being a leader in Canada and in the supplement industry, without going into too much detail, because this is a whole other podcast in and of itself, but are there any products that you guys are coming out with new, like things that people should be kind of on the lookout, things that you're seeing just kind of trending in the social media online world that people are maybe talking about or that are being talked about incorrectly, like products, not principles? Are there any products that you want to kind of discuss about in regards to what AOR is coming up with? I know that's like a big, huge question, but like, is there anything you want to talk about for the last few minutes here?
Yeah, I think, thank you for allowing for that discussion. I think there's a lot of new exciting evidence in terms of how cellular health impacts our overall health and how that plays into chronic disease. So I'm sure you'll see more and more people talking about things like NMN, polyamines like spermidine, which actually is derived from wheat germ. These are things, CoQ10, carnitine, they all impact those powerhouses of the cell, so mitochondrial function. And I think what's so exciting in the research is we're shifting, kind of from like a disease approach. I think in the past it was lots of antioxidant, and now we're also supporting, the function and structure of each part of the cell. And that's really cool and exciting. So that gets to be seen a lot with, it's got like widespread benefits. Postbiotics, we've talked so much about probiotics. Postbiotics are a really exciting area of research that's coming up. And again, some of these are really in their infancy. The research is in its infancy, but we know that the risk of having a product is quite low because, it's just like a dead bacteria. It's like the cell wall of a bacteria. So it's heat treated, and that can have positive impacts we're seeing on gut health. So yeah, I think we're at such an exciting time from a research perspective that I would hate to see momentum kind of be dragged down with from the regulatory perspective. But yeah, I think there's every year we see a new batch of people recognizing the connection between your gut health and your brain health. And as we normalize talking about mood disorders and anxiety and depression, those simple changes to our gut can really make such profound difference. And that's such a source of pride because you can really impact someone's quality of life with such simple things. I'm also very excited about how we prepare and use botanical medicines. Things like saffron I've already mentioned has a long history of traditional use, but now, science is kind of catching up with how to actually use that, and what its therapeutic index is, and how to sustainably extract it and source it. So yeah, I could go on and on, like I said, for hours about this, but, ultimately I think with COVID, we did start to look at how do we make this more holistic? How do we take approaches to our health and look at the bigger picture instead of just trying to deal with a solution in a singular way or in a, how do we expand our knowledge of this and what is available to us? And I think, researchers are starting to do a really great job of that.
Yeah, no, and I'm happy that things are going in that way as well. I think that anyone who's involved in this field is happy that is the way because, it's going to improve the health of the population overall. And it's more on the preventative side, which we've been, banging the drum for years now. Like we've got to be, prevention, not reactionary, but that's a very difficult thing to do when people are uneducated about this and don't have the proper products and knowledge available to them to actually prevent things from happening. Yeah. So I'm grateful to people like yourself and companies like AOR for leading the way and kind of spearheading these type of things, because someone has to do that, and the rest of us can just kind of parrot and and repeat and spread the message in our own way. But someone's got to be really on the cutting edge of that. So I thank you for that. Where can people, besides their primary healthcare practitioner or their naturopath or whoever, where can people go to like find out more information about what's new and up and coming and just general kind of supplement knowledge? Is there a resource that you point them to, the AOR website perhaps?
Yeah. So AOR.ca in Canada and AORhealth.com in the States. AOR.ca, we try to engage our community with lots of magazines that are available, lots of deep dive into the industry as a whole. What does it take what are the different forms of magnesium? What do they mean? Which I know magnesium is a hot button topic right now. So yeah, there's lots of resources and materials on there. And I think we have this beautiful opportunity with social media, with podcasts, in that we're able to learn so much from each other. So I appreciate you providing the space. And I think, the more knowledgeable we can, or the more empowered we feel about our healthcare decisions, the better questions we can ask, the better we can push our regulators to make it make sense for us. And then our healthcare practitioners, we can really advocate for our health there. So, I'm I really appreciated this time, and apologize if I went on my soapbox a little too much, but now is the time to act, right?
This is the time, and you didn't at all. You're great. So I thank you for your time as well. And just a great final message there. So I will put the links to the AOR websites, Canada and the US in the show notes, as well as the link to get involved with the Save Our Supplements campaign, just to say your piece and stand up for yourself and for your fellow Canadians. Dr. Nibber, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing with us. I'll put everything in the show notes again. Give this podcast a share, because this is one that people need to hear about. Canadians especially, maybe Americans maybe a little bit less so, but like my Canadian audience, which is most of you, share this with your people, because this matters a lot. It seems like something that may not affect you until it affects you, and you go and buy vitamin D and it's 5 times more expensive in the store. So if you don't want that to happen, this is something that matters to you. So share this podcast with a friend or with someone who needs to hear it, all that good stuff. Like, share, subscribe on all the platforms, helps this thing grow and get out to more people. Give me a follow as well on Instagram if you're new here, at Daniel Yoris. And that's that. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate each and every one of you. Go outside, be a good person. Chat soon.